Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we're reading the book Set on Fire, with permission from the author, Taurus Montgomery, a young and successful SDA pastor with a commitment to serving the youth of this generation. The story is an autobiography of his life, where as a child, he grew up in the hood in Mobile, Alabama. In our last reading, we covered chapter 11, entitled Extreme Makeover, where the boys and their father returned to the big house. Their mom did not come because this time she was determined and put her foot down. The house was not finished, and she would not return in the state it was. Although some things like the bathroom and Powell's room where the fire started had been completely redone, the rest of the house remained much the same, with a little patchwork here and there. There were also still burn spots everywhere. One thing that had not changed at all was the roaches, mice, and rats, which had become even bolder than before, and no amount of mouse traps, sticky pads, or poison balls could deter them. While attempting to get a midnight snack one night, Taurus saw a rat as big as a cat, and he decided he would wait for daylight and for breakfast instead. But one thing had changed and experienced an extreme makeover. It was not a thing, but a person. It was Powell. He had changed completely. He no longer smoked, cursed, listened to rap music, ran around with girls, or any of the things he and Taurus used to do before. Despite the environment, he was focused on God's plan for his life. He was always reading, and his favorite books were the Bible and a book called The Desire of Ages. He spent a long time hanging out with church friends, and he prayed all the time. One night, Taurus, sneaking into the house at 2 a.m. from the club, found Powell on his knees in the living room, praying. The folk at church had grown to love and respect him. He was made a youth leader and teacher of the youth Sabbath school class, which had bored them so much before. They even asked him to preach, and all this at age 15 as a sophomore in high school. In the meantime, Taurus focused on himself. He was still smoking weed and drinking, even during the basketball season. He had achieved superstar status in his neighborhood for his basketball skills in the parks and in the pickup games. But somehow, he couldn't transfer these skills to the hardwood court in his high school games. His scoring average was much lower in the league games than in the neighborhood games. He just couldn't make the transfer. His team made it to the playoffs in their league, but they lost their first game and were out of the finals. Graduation time came around, and Taurus didn't know what he was going to do. Neither his scoring nor his grades were high enough for any of the D1 schools to offer him a scholarship. And after the graduation breakfast, he and some friends went out and smoked and drank and laughed and joked about anything they could think of. He was truly disappointed in himself and did not know what would be next in life for him now that his dreams of getting into the NBA had been destroyed. Please don't forget that you can purchase this book at the author's website, taurusmontgomery.com. That's TARUSMONTGOMERY, taurusmontgomery.com. and read along with us as we pick up the story today in chapter 12, entitled Deadly Distractions. The more you let yourself be distracted from where you're going, the more you are the person that you are. Thomas Kempis. When August came, I still was not registered at any school. I did not know where I was going. Mad clueless. At the last minute, and out of desperation, I asked the girl I used to date about her plans for school. She told me she was going to Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, MGCC. I had never heard of that school in my life. It was located in a place called Perkinston, Mississippi, an hour's drive from Mobile. I decided to pay to visit so I could register. My brother Gabe drove me there. Powell came along too. The school was in a small town, a very small town. In fact, the school was the town. It was in the deep backwoods of Mississippi. I just knew it was KKK land. When I got there, I was surprised to see so many other black people, but I was glad. I registered for classes, and 2 weeks later, I was moving into my dorm room and unpacking my stuff. I was officially away from home and living on my own. No one was standing over my shoulder telling me what to do and what not to do. I didn't have to be bothered by the ills of life of that big house. I was definitely hyped about getting on the school's basketball team. A flicker of hope for my hoop dreams returned once I entered the school. I thought about NBA stars like Steve Francis and Sean Marion, who did great in their junior college, or JUCO, earned scholarships to play D1, and then got drafted to the league. That was my new plan. I had not fully given up on my dream, even though I was contradicting the dream by some of my decisions. I was still smoking trees. I was distracted and didn't even know it. Somehow, I had convinced myself that it wasn't doing me any harm. You see, I was convinced that if I just had the opportunity to play on the team, I would make the most of it and see my dream become reality. One of the players invited me to come to the tryouts after seeing me play in a pickup game. I went, only to discover that the coach already had his team. The tryouts were only for people he already knew, and he didn't know me. My new plan had quickly come to a dead-end street. This news was as bad as hearing that there would be an NBA lockout. It began to sink in. I would not be playing in the NBA. Though I never verbalized it, I was giving up on that dream. Like many young players, I did not fully understand what it really takes to make it to the pros. I knew it took tons of practice and hard work, but I did not know about the mental discipline and the mental focus it took when I was not on the basketball court. This is where I was failing big time. Even before hearing the news that the coach already had his squad, I was not focused on succeeding on the hardwood or in class. In fact, my life was out of focus. From the time I arrived at MGCC, I did not take classes seriously. I was often late, very often. I was unmotivated to study. I was upset about being in remedial courses, since my GPA coming out of high school was so low, coupled with the fact that my ACT score was lower than the age of most high school freshmen. If I wasn't dozing off in class, it's because I was already asleep. How do you make 20s and 14s in college? How do you not do homework in college? How do you cram for quizzes and tests in college? How do you cheat on exams in college? I could have written a book on how to get away with all of these things. But that book would have been a recipe for failure, which I was doing a fantastic job at. My purpose in life had been deeply connected to basketball. When it was taken away from me, so was my reason for living. That's why I tell young people all the time that your life's purpose must be bigger than a football or a basketball. It must be bigger than any sport, as an injury or some other unforeseen circumstance can snatch it away in a second. The absence of true purpose in my life was not only the root cause of my lack of effort in class, but it was also the root cause of my lack of effort in life. It led me to giving up on myself. I started doing things I never thought I would do, things my family, teachers, or parents never imagined I would do. Like the unforgettable night that Tank, BJ, Mark, and I drove around for at least an hour looking for a car to steal. This car would serve as a getaway ride for another robbery we were planning later on that night. Seeing what we thought would be an easy target, we stopped, parked our ride, and two of us, me and BJ, got out. With the gun in my hand, hidden behind my back, we approached the victim. I pulled the gun out, pointed it at them, and demanded with authority, "Give me the keys." With fear-filled eyes, he reached behind his back. Man, I hope this guy didn't have a gun. To my surprise, he pulled out his keys. You see, I had planned for the worst-case scenario, such as the man pulling out a gun or putting up a fight, a robbery gone bad. It may sound crazy to you, but I thank God for keeping me safe that night. I grabbed the man's keys. We jumped in the car, cranked it up. BJ and I slammed the doors. With adrenaline rushing through my body faster than water over breached levees, we fled the scene. As I sped out of the parking lot, guess who I saw? MPD. A police car passed right by us. My heart dropped, but the cops were clueless as to what had just happened. While they were clueless, I was speechless. It was a classic example of what if. I had just carjacked someone, a crime that could have landed me in prison for a very long time. To make matters worse, I used an empty gun. In fact, the gun didn't even work. Take it from me. A life without purpose leads you to do stupid things. But doing stupid stuff like this does not just happen overnight. It takes time. It is when you get away with smaller crimes that you get bolder in your criminal activities. For example, one night after a basketball game, we stopped at a local gas station. I was in the car hanging out with some guys I knew from Atlanta. The gas station was the hangout spot every night after a home game. A gang of us went inside the already crowded store with the intention of getting whatever we wanted, without paying. Once we got inside, they became fearful and froze up. So we came back out and went inside again. But this time, I led the way. "Let me show you how we do it where I'm from," I bragged. I went to the aisle where the beer was located and grabbed 2 cases of beer, 24 beers in each case. The checkout counter was crowded. My friends were surrounding me with their hands full of goodies as well. We jumped in the car, laughing like a bunch of hyenas, and drove on to the club to join the party. I got sloppy drunk that night. I think I got alcohol poisoning. I could have lost my life. I blacked out. I did not wake up the next day until 4 p.m. I woke up to the most disgusting smell ever. I had been sleeping in my own vomit. It was all over the bed covers and the side of my face. I didn't remember a thing from the previous night. My friends told me that I blacked out after leaving the club. I didn't know where I was, how I got there, or what happened. One of my boys, Rodney, helped carry me to my room that night. But that incident wasn't going to keep me from clubbing. If I wasn't at the club in Perk, I was at the club in Mobile. Since one of my uncles was a photographer who took pictures at the club, I could easily get in for free. Club life in Mobile was like a 2-sided coin. On any given night, you can have a great time with beautiful women dressed to impress, hot music blasting through the speakers, and cold drinks to get a good buzz. And then there were those nights that fights broke out. They often started when certain songs were played, or when some dude got mad that his girl was dancing with another guy, or 2 ladies would start fighting over some guy who really didn't care for either one of them. I remember one night when a fight broke out that was so bad, the club owners kicked everyone out. They could stop the music from playing, but that didn't stop the fight from turning into a gunfight. By the time I got outside, there was a sea of people in front of the club surrounding the front entrance. Shots were fired. People started running and screaming, "They're shooting! They're shooting!" As I was running and ducking and seeing people fall, I didn't know whether a bullet hit them or if they had tripped over something. It was a scary moment. But nothing was scarier than the night I lost control of a stolen vehicle I was driving. I made this trip often, but this time it was different. I was coming from Mobile on my way back to Perkinston. The radio was on full blast. Lil Wayne was banging in my ears. As usual, I was high as a kite. I was driving 110 miles per hour going north on Highway 49. With my head bobbing to the beat, I was rapping every word to the song. It was pitch dark outside. There were no lights around except for the stars in the sky and the headlights of the car. There were deep drops to the left and to the right of the wood-bordered road that I was traveling. No gas stations existed for miles. Then all of a sudden, a large black cat-looking animal dashed across the highway directly in front of me. When I saw it, I panicked. I was going too fast to slam on the brakes. I hit it and lost control of the car. The car began to shake violently. I let go of the steering wheel. My life flashed before me. In what seemed like a split second, as the car went out of control, Without even thinking, I shouted at the top of my lungs as loud as I could, "Jesus!" It's crazy how we call on God when we get into trouble, but pay Him no attention once the trouble is over. I've heard church folks say there is power in the name of Jesus. I believed that the steering wheels and the tires on the car heard me call on that name and said to one another, "Let's get this car straight." Now I had some evidence of what they meant when they said, "There is power in the name of Jesus." I believe there was no reason other than God's mercy that the car did not flip or crash into the ditch that night. More than the shooting incidents, more than the nights of binge drinking, more than any other time in my life, this incident caused my life to flash before me. I just knew I was about to die. After the car miraculously got back in alignment, I drove the speed limit the rest of the way back to the campus, thinking about my life. Even though I continued to make similar bad decisions that got me into more situations like the one on that night, I could feel that something inside of me was pulling me towards changing my ways. On January 31st, 2001, I had an unexpected, unplanned, unusual counseling session. The counselor wasn't a trained professional, but he asked all the right questions. It took place on campus. It was dark outside. I remember because the counseling session took place on the stump of a large tree just outside my dormitory. It was a little past midnight. No one was around. I sat down on the tree stump, pulled out a cigar filled with marijuana, and began to smoke the night away. That's when the counselor's questions started coming. So is this how you're going to spend your life? What are you going to do with yourself? What if instead of that guy pulling his keys out, he pulled out a gun and blew your brains out? What if you had gotten arrested for stealing that beer from the gas station? What if the car had flipped over that night? What if you get HIV from messing around with these girls? What are you going to do with the talents people have been praising you for since you were in kindergarten? Do you think people have been telling you that you have a chance to be great for no reason? Are you going to waste your life or live up to your potential? The questions kept coming, flooding my mind. I was the counselor. I was the one asking the questions. But it's not like it was something I was trying to do. It was a time of serious self-examination. For a moment, I thought I was tripping because I was high. But this was real. I was actually looking at myself in the mirror of life, dealing with the hard questions of life. At some point, everyone has to. If you don't, you might waste your life. I didn't have any immediate answers to these questions. However, I began to realize that the drinking, smoking, robbing, stealing, longings for money, and chasing after women were only symptoms of my deeper issue, a loss of hope. To lose hope is to give up. I had given up on myself. Whenever you give up on yourself, you're basically committing suicide. Even if you didn't pull a trigger, slit your wrist, or overdose popping pills. I believe that people who give up on themselves and their dreams don't know or don't understand their purpose. I know I didn't know mine. Even though I had given up on myself, there was someone who had not. My brother Powell. He knew of all the things I was doing, yet he never condemned me. He never blasted me on it. He never called me out or talked down to me like he was better than me. He didn't give up on me. After the counseling session, I was overwhelmed in trying to come up with answers to those questions. I finished the blunt, thumped the doobie in the grass, stood up, and went to my room to get some rest. Maybe I can sleep those questions off, I thought. The next morning would prove otherwise. The end of chapter 12 and the end of part 2. Part 3. Destination. The place to which someone or something is going or being sent. Chapter 13. The decision. In this fall, man, this is very tough. In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and play with the Miami Heat. LeBron James. On national television, when millions were watching live on ESPN, LeBron James made a decision that would change a lot of things in his life. His address, his employer, his team, his teammates, and his status as a player would be altered because of his choice. This decision would also change the way people viewed LeBron. But when it was all said and done, he made his announcement. In this fall, this is very tough. In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat. I feel like it's going to give me the best opportunity to win and to win for multiple years. And not only just to win in the regular season, or just to win 5 games in a row or 3 games in a row. I want to be able to win championships. Source: ESPN. Sports commentators called him stupid for wanting to join another team of superstars. Many Cleveland fans were furious and outraged, to say the least. Nevertheless, LeBron made a decision, one that he thought was the best for him and his family and what he wanted to do with his life. The next morning, when I woke up, I was also on the verge of making a decision that would bring about some changes that I never thought I'd make. It started out just like any other morning. I woke up late. I washed my face. I brushed my teeth. I turned on my music and then jumped in the shower. I threw on my clothes and was about to go to class to go to sleep. But on this particular morning, the phone ringing stopped me in my tracks before I could leave the room. After turning the radio down, I answered it. It was my mama. "Hey, Taurus," she said. "What's up, Mama?" I was happy to hear her voice. By this time, my mother had moved away from Mobile, away from my father. Her new residence was in Huntsville, Alabama. She moved there in pursuit of a job that she had landed and enjoyed doing. I was happy that she left, except that meant I had to cut my braids off since I had no one to braid my hair. I hated that. "How are you doing, son?" my mother asked. "I'm good. Just getting ready to go to class." Our conversation continued for another 10 minutes or so. We talked about a few things. What I remember most is what she said about living for God. I hated those types of conversations. They either bored me or scared me because I didn't want to hear it. Along with Powell, my mother had also made the decision to follow God. As our phone call came to an end, she reminded me of what I knew to be true. "I love you, son. Have a good day." "All right, Ma." She told me she'd be praying for me. I hung up the phone. There was a moment of silence in the room that seemed like it made time stand still. I sat there on the edge of my bed, pondering her words. Her words were not very deep. They were not scary. They were not mysterious. She did not use any pushy persuasion tactics. To this day, I cannot put my finger on it, but the words she spoke hit the spot. They scratched where I was itching. I began wondering about the previous night, the questions I'd been asking myself. I started thinking about the whole God thing. I started thinking about my brother and how peaceful he seemed to be. I was unsatisfied with my life. I was convinced that God was trying to get my attention. He was. He did. All of a sudden, something came over me. My eyes began to swell up with water. A teardrop slid slowly down my cheek. My heart was pounding rapidly. It was like every negative thought, every bad word, every crime, every selfish thing that I'd ever done flashed before me. Unable to stand on my feet under the heavy burden of guilt and shame, I dropped to my knees and cried out with the same voice as the night I had lost control of the car. "God, whatever you want to do with my life, have your way. I am yours. Please forgive me for everything I have done that hurt you." This time, it came from the bottom of my heart. It was real. I asked God to forgive me for everything I had done wrong. I even asked for forgiveness for stuff I may have forgotten about from when I was a kid. I stayed there on my knees and shed what seemed like 7 years of tears. It was a very emotional moment. Nevertheless, it was the happiest moment of my life and the greatest day of my life. The tears I shed were not tears of sadness but of joy. I was excited. I felt relieved, refreshed, and recreated. Often I've tried to compare this day with events I had experienced or seen in order to explain the joy and satisfaction of that day. It was greater than being named to the all-tournament team of the regional playoffs. It was greater than any high I'd gotten from smoking, any buzz from drinking, and any thrill from sexual promiscuity. It reminds me of the night that Michael Jordan embraced and kissed the championship trophy after the Bulls won their third title. This was just after the death of Jordan's father. It was similar to the celebration of Obama's election. Like the crowd at the park in Chicago who stood giving the president a round of applause, my heart was giving God a standing ovation. I was celebrating and thanking Him for being so patient with me. No matter how many similes or metaphors I use, there are no words to adequately describe the experience I had that day, February 1st, 2001, the day I made the decision to give my life to Jesus Christ. I got up off my knees. Looking around my room, I noticed all of the posters and pictures I had on the wall. One by one, I went around the room and snatched pornographic pictures off. I threw away the XXX magazines I had kept in my room. I opened my Sony stereo system, grabbed my gangster rap CDs, and crushed them into small pieces. I didn't want to listen to them again because the stuff they rapped about went against the decision. I took off my platinum chain and was about to throw it away. Common sense told me to sell it. I needed to buy some new clothes since I was getting rid of all my other clothes. I didn't want anything in my closet or in my room to pull me back into the life I was leaving. The Bible says, "Do not make provisions for the flesh." Romans 13 and verse 14. I got rid of those things, not because someone told me to, but because I knew what they had once represented in my life. I felt they would have distracted me from giving God my all. After throwing away all of my gangster rap music and lovemaking, aka R&B CDs, I needed something to listen to. So I went out to holler at Kim. She was my ex-girlfriend, the one who told me about MGCC in the first place. When I got to her dorm room and told her about my decision, she encouraged me. I knew she was a church girl, so I asked if she had some gospel music I could listen to. She gave me a cassette tape by Kirk Franklin. I knew who he was because, well, just about everybody knows Kirk Franklin's music. I played the tape over and over and over again. I couldn't stop listening to the song, "The Storm is Over Now." It sure was, and I wanted everybody to know it. I played it as loud as I played music before the decision. It spoke to my heart in a way that kept me encouraged every time I listened. The word spread around the dorm. That Mobile, that's what they called me, changed. Homeboy got saved on us. Eventually my friends stopped by my room to holler at me. They wanted to see it for themselves. When they heard the music I was blasting, they were surprised. Rodney entered the room smiling from ear to ear with a confused look on his face. In his strong, thick Atlanta, Georgia accent, he asked, "What happened to you, Shorty?" I replied, "I gave my life to God, bro." He smiled in disbelief. "Come on, Shorty, be real. Stop lying, man." "Bro, why would I lie about something like that?" Then he asked me 50 million questions about all the things I was going to stop doing. The waiting to be sexually intimate until marriage part was the one that really shocked him. I'm grateful for the friends I had at MGCC. Most of my friends respected my decision and were glad for me. I could tell that they were shocked by the overnight transformation because they knew me. They knew how I lived before. I was shocked too. But then again, as I thought about it, I noticed in retrospect how I had slowly become more and more open to God in the strangest places and during the strangest times. Like the night I was sitting in the parking lot at the club, the thought came to mind, I'm sitting here with this beer in my hand, marijuana in my pocket on a Friday night about to get loaded. My little brother is at church right now. He's probably praying or telling someone about God. And what am I doing? Wasting my life. A similar incident took place one evening as I was parked outside of my brother Gabe's apartment, chilling in my stolen car, bumping my favorite rapper as weed smoke filled the vehicle. All of a sudden I paused, broke out in tears, turned the music off, jumped out of the car, ripped off my jewelry, and flung it across the parking lot like Cam Newton on Third and Long. I was growing frustrated with the choices I was making and growing tired of the life I was living. But I didn't know where to turn or what to do. What about you? Are you tired of making the same bad decisions and getting the same poor results? Are you fed up with yourself? Have you come to realize that the decisions you're making are not bringing the satisfaction you thought they would? Do you want to be better and do better and make some positive changes? If your answer is yes, then you must first begin by asking and answering some questions. Who am I? Why was I born into this world? What is my purpose in life? How is my relationship with God right now? I have come to realize that the reason why I did what I was doing was because I didn't know who I was. I'm not talking about not knowing my name. I'm talking about knowing who you are as a person. What are your values? What is important to you and why? What is your identity? It is so important to know who you are, because when you don't know who you are, you will let other people define you. Other people will tell you who you are, and no one does that greater than the media. According to the media, women must be slim as a pencil in order to be beautiful. Black women must have straight, silky hair in order for their hair to be considered good hair. Men must have a six-pack of abs, a bulging chest bursting from their shirt like the Incredible Hulk, and biceps bigger than Iron Man's suit. If you're a young black male, the media will also try to define you as a gun-toting, dope-selling, ignorant, and irresponsible baby maker whose future is as dim as the light in a prison cell that has your number on it. And by chance, if you don't go to prison, your only hope is through sports or entertainment. This is what you embrace by default when you allow other people to tell you who you are. What's even worse than allowing the media to define you is that you may actually convince yourself that you're someone else. As I mentioned before, I wanted to be just like Allen Iverson. That's why I tried to dress like him, walk like him, play like him, and sometimes I even tried to talk like him. I wanted his swag because I didn't have my own. I didn't have my own because, again, I didn't know who I was. When my hoop dreams began to zoom out, my rap dreams zoomed in. But I didn't want to be just any rapper. I wanted to be Lil Wayne. Not like Lil Wayne, but Lil Wayne. I wore soldieries, Reebok Classics, because that's what Wayne and the Hot Boys did. I wore red bandanas and black bandanas and blue bandanas because I was trying to be like someone else. I bought bling bling so I could have the little Tunechi swag. I was feeling myself when I pulled up at a red light one time and some girls yelled out, "Girl, he looks like Lil Wayne." Understanding who you are also helps you to understand who you are not. There's nothing wrong with learning from people, appreciating their abilities and admiring their gifts. But just keep in mind, you are you and they are they. You're not Beyonce. You're not Drake. You're not Justin Bieber. You're not Nicki Minaj or Rihanna or Taylor Swift or Stephen Curry or Cam Newton or whoever your favorite celebrity might be. You are not them and they are not you. It took a while for me to learn that lesson myself. Basically, I was going through an identity crisis. An identity crisis is a period of time when a person is confused about who they are and what they value. When you don't know who you are likely to imitate someone else. It can last for weeks, months, or years. It can even last for a lifetime. Nearly all teenagers will go through an identity crisis at some point in their lives. You may be going through one right now, or you might know someone else who is. I experienced it for about 7 years, from the time I was 12 to 19 years old. After going through my identity crisis, I noticed that there are 4 characteristics of a person who is confused about who they are. One thing you will notice is they consistently make poor choices. Everyone makes mistakes, but a person who does not know who they are makes bad choices repeatedly. These choices bring about negative consequences that impact themselves and others. Yet, they constantly choose the wrong option. The second trait is that the person devalues himself or herself. They see themselves as worthless, no good, unattractive, and so on. They constantly belittle themselves and beat themselves up about any little thing. One of the ways they try to deal with this is by looking down on other people. They do this to make themselves feel better. I was using marijuana and other things to try and ease my pain. When I smoked with my friends, we would laugh about it. My careless state of mind led me to believe that I could smoke my problems away rather than deal with them. But when the high went down and my friends were no longer around to laugh with me, the pain was still present. The third characteristic of a person who is going through an identity crisis is that they're often imitating someone else. What I find to be really crazy is when I see people who don't know who they are imitating someone who doesn't know who they are either. It's called the blind leading the blind. Lastly, people who are going through an identity crisis tend to hang with people who are also going through an identity crisis. In other words, if you notice the above 3 traits in the people you hang around with, you very well may be experiencing an identity crisis as well. The old folks used to say that birds of the same feather always fly together. My identity crisis came to an end that Thursday morning when I decided to give my life to God. The decision helped me understand that a person will never really know who they are until they know whose they are. And the good news is that God wants you to know who you are, even more than you want to know. He's always trying to speak to us. It does not matter where you are, how you got there, why you went, or what you're doing. His main goal is to reveal Himself and His purpose for your life, and to make it clear to you that you are His. I have come to this conclusion. Since God looked beyond the weed smoke, the alcohol, the foul music, the club hopping, and all the other distractions to get my attention, then He must have wanted me to know that I am His. Once I began this process of discovering my identity, something strange happened. Not only was it strange, but also scary. The end of chapter 13 of Set on Fire by Taurus Montgomery.